Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Esau McCaulley podcast. I'm your host, Esau McCaulley, and I'm super excited about today's episode. We have our first fellow Holy Post co-worker as a part of the podcast. Yeah. We have someone who works here. Who's actually, one second, let me finish. I'm going to introduce Kaitlyn. Okay. We got someone who actually works here who's decided that we're worth her time. And so we have on the podcast, Kaitlyn Schiess. She is
Hang on. That's not how you say her last name.
Is it Chess?
Schiess.
Edit this part out. Kaitlyn Schiess. I was nervous about that the whole time. Kaitlyn Schiess. Oh my goodness, I blew it already. She is a co-host of we call it the flagship, the Holy Post podcast. And she also has her own podcast, Curiously Kaitlyn. She's the author of 2 books, The Liturgy of the Bible. Is that what it is? Nope. I'm so good at this.
That's the crossover, the two together. Yeah.
The Liturgy of Politics and the Ballad and the Bible. Mm-hmm. We're so happy to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Esau. I'm happy to be here.
And we're also joined by producer Mike. I guess you also...
I also work here.
Yeah.
I'm on staff at the Holy Post.
Yeah. I'm at the other staff, is what I meant.
The people who are on camera?
The important people.
No,
wow.
Well, I hear word is on the street, and I didn't know this. Not that I don't listen to your podcast. I do listen to it. Word is on the street that you're like double timing, that sometimes you're on Curiously Kaitlyn.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. Lately, Esau, she's never threatened to fire me on her podcast.
So this is not exclusive?
I'm just sending out some feelers.
Yeah, he's cheating on you. He's cheating on you.
During the prep of the podcast, we were tossing around topics. Mm-hmm. And Kaitlyn said, I know nothing about sports.
True.
And Kaitlyn thought that would be a reason for us to avoid the topic. But it also meant for me, here on this podcast, we exploit weaknesses. And since you don't know anything about sports, I'm going to open with a sports question.
Great.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of things to clarify how much background I need to give to you.
Okay.
Do you know who the Milwaukee Bucks are?
Not even a little bit.
Okay. They are a basketball team who plays in Milwaukee.
That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So do you know who Giannis Antetokounmpo is?
Definitely not.
Okay. Giannis Antetokounmpo, well, I can say his name correct. Giannis Antetokounmpo is a famous basketball player. He's one of the best players in the NBA.
I once sat next to him.
You once sat next to
at
him?
the United Club lounge at O'Hare.
Right.
Okay.
That would be impressive if I had known who he was.
So Giannis is he's very famous. He's very good.
Okay.
And the team isn't very good. Oh. And so it's getting to this point where he might ask to be traded.
You can do that.
So you can say, I don't want to be here anymore.
Can producers ask to be traded?
We're going to get,
I'll make a really good offer for you, Mike.
Here's the thing. So he's getting to the place where he can ask to go to another team.
Okay.
And they're trying to keep him happy so that he re-signs for another contract.
Okay.
And a few months ago, they signed his brother, who was not in the NBA, to come to the NBA. So the brother had been in the NBA.
But his brother was playing basketball.
Yeah, but he wasn't very good.
Okay.
And so his brother had been out of the NBA for a year. They signed his brother. Yesterday, they found out, they announced it on the news, that he had signed his other brother, who's never played in the NBA. Wow. So now there's 3 Antetokounmpos who have signed for the Milwaukee Bucks, all in an attempt to keep Giannis happy.
I'm curious about the fact that they assume, or maybe they must know from him, that would work. I know lots of people for whom signing multiple of their brothers to the same team would not make them want to stay.
Kaitlyn, are you trying to say something about your sister?
No, I love my sister. I would never want to play basketball with her.
So I'm going to ask you the question. Let's just say, for example, here's the question for you.
Okay.
Let's say, for example, your contract, the Holy Post, is coming towards conclusion.
Yeah.
And we're trying to keep you here. We're trying to get you to re-sign. And you can make any demands of the Holy Post to get you to re-sign. What would the demands be? What would you ask? I want this, or I'm out of here and I'm going to the rival podcast down the road.
Whoa, shoot. What would I ask for?
And you get to ask us and answer the same question.
I would ask for a wardrobe budget.
Oh.
If the Holy Post could just fund some of my outfits.
That is true.
For the live events, for my own personal use, for the show. That would be great.
We're using YouTube more and more.
Exactly. My shoe collection. Wardrobe.
Your shoes are never in the shot.
But my happiness is contingent upon
then there we go.
So I would say, and now I'm trying to think who would I want you to hire that would help me stay? Yeah. Who would I just want to hang out with?
You could say re-up the contract of someone already on staff who's helping you out. You could.
Close, but not quite. You know what I would do? I would say I have a podcast with the Holy Post that has children's questions about God, theology, and the Bible. I would ask for producer Mike's children to just be regular components of the office culture, because I met them recently and I adore them. And if I could hang out with them all the time, that would be a real draw for me to stay.
Okay, so Mike, your contract is coming up and we want to keep you.
Okay.
And this is your moment of power. What would you ask for?
Oh my goodness, what would I ask for? You didn't prep us for this.
No,
at
I
all.
didn't. I asked if you wanted to be prepped. You said no, just spring it on me.
I would ask. I want Esau.
Go ahead.
I'm going to ride your coattails.
Okay.
I would just say, like, whatever Esau is committed to doing,
Okay.
whether with the Holy Post or not,
Okay.
I get 10%.
Whoa! Okay.
It's because I believe in you so much.
He wants some of my money.
Yeah.
He's really moved from combating with you to like sucking up.
There we go.
Well, you know.
Hopefully, the people who are in charge of the Holy Post are seeing these. Well, not your demand. Forget that one.
Yeah.
But the Kaitlyn demand, to be honest, I do think about, for those of you who are watching online, it is the idea that, like, how many times have I worn the one shirt that I like for this episode? So I'm pro, like, budget for a wardrobe.
That would be great.
Now, we probably should get beyond, like, the silly stuff to the main topics. And the
Wait,
first one,
Esau, what would your answer be?
what would my answer be? This is super inside baseball. What would it be? I mean, the first answer, if it was actually true, if you want to know the real true, and this is only for like real Holy Post insiders.
Oh, okay.
The elimination of the news of the butt. I would just. I
can't believe I didn't think of that.
I was surprised, Kaitlyn. You had an opportunity.
That is such a good.
I would kill it. I would be like, I'm out.
Esau's here to save the day.
Or it's in my contract that when I'm on the flagship, I don't have to hear about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Our first topic for today deals with this issue that's a little bit more complex. I was floating around Instagram and I saw a friend of mine, Charlie Dates, who posted a video. Because there had been someone who, like a Christian pastor, influencer, I don't know this person very well, who had accused the Black church of ethnic idolatry. And she said, I don't even know why there is this thing called the Black church. And Charlie Dates, who's the pastor of two influential churches in Chicagoland, Salem and Progressive Baptist Church, he, rather than condemning her, says, why don't you come and have a private conversation? And we can explain to you the origins of the Black church. And the reason I thought that topic was interesting is because there seems to be kind of an added scrutiny on Black Christianity in the last few months. And in particular, it seems like in the aftermath of like the Charlie Kirk assassination, there's been a hyper focus on, which is interesting because like the Black church is not directly involved. The person who was there was not, the murderer was not affiliated with the Black church, but it feels like there's been a heightened point of interest. A couple of things that have happened that I don't know people are covering in the news. One is that there have been like Turning Point USA and other organizations have started doing tours that have been meant to target Black colleges and universities and to go there. And there's also been like increased bomb threats and things for the Black church. And this criticism of ethnic idolatry is not first being levied by this person, but it seems to be in the atmosphere. And so I just noticed that there's been a heightened scrutiny on like what's going on with these Black Christians, which I think is a little bit interesting.
Yeah, Esau, maybe it would be helpful if you're willing to give like the briefest of histories of why there is a Black church. Because that's something Charlie did in the video.
Yeah. So Charlie talked about this, but I think that people have this misunderstanding that people just up and decided to say, we don't want to be around Black people. Let's go. We don't want to be around white people. Let's go and start this thing called the Black church. One of the founding kind of stories that often explain it to people is that during slavery, there was segregated pews where Black people were put in one set of pews and white people were in another set of pews. And Richard Allen and some others wanted to pray at the front of the church in the church in Philadelphia. So these Black people go to the front of the church and they're kneeling before the altar to pray. And because Black people were prohibited from praying there, they were literally picked up and carried out of the church. And that physical act of carrying these Black people out of the church began what was the first historically Black denomination, which is the African United Methodist Episcopal Church. But that particular story, if you were to take it to the Baptist context and the Presbyterian context, that story is repeated over and over and over again. That most of the time, the creation of the Black church was rooted in not a desire to segregate, but because of the influences of white supremacy that ran them out of these churches. And so the descriptor black church began to refer to these groups. Now, one of the other questions that people often ask is, well, why don't you then end these black churches now? Why don't you just shut them down? Well, now there's this thing called segregation where a lot of black people lived in black neighborhoods, and the black people in those black neighborhoods go to those black churches. And so to ask them to leave their neighborhood and go to another neighborhood to go to a majority white church seems to be a little bit odd. To ask them to drop the moniker black church also, again, seems a little bit odd. And there's one more, and I was trying to find it because I read this in the book somewhere, but people can find the information, or the data will seem so self-evident that it won't be controversial. There was a time, I think in the 70s or the 80s, where a lot of mainline denominations decided we need to get rid of these ethnic-specific ministries. And we need to get rid of the black ministries and the Asian American ministries. And we need to combine into one in this attempt to bring forward racial harmony. And they found something that was an unintended consequence. When they eliminated those ministries and they made them into one group, most of the white churches refused to hire black pastors. And that it is this basically the case that it's rare for a majority white church to hire black clergy. And so if you say, if we want to eliminate all black churches, what you actually would end up doing is probably eliminating the black pastorate. Yeah. And even now in multi-ethnic churches, I think something like 80% of multiracial churches are led by white pastors. And even black pastors, which is, I'm actually the black pastor of a multiracial church. We're about 60% white, about 40% ethnic minorities. That's rare in America. And so I think that it sounds very spiritual to condemn the existence of black churches without understanding the history.
The other thing that I thought Charlie did so well was in his invitation to have a conversation with her, he said without cameras.
Yeah.
That you can tell for him, it was not a desire. He easily could have made a social clip that would have owned the other side, that would have went super viral and done really well. And that was not his mission. His mission was to let's actually have a conversation away from the spotlight, away from the cameras, so that we can both learn from each other. And in the wake of the post-Charlie Kirk assassination, where he has been lauded as this example of good dialogue, it's like, well, I don't know. He was a lot of times just trying to own the other side and get some great clips. And to see this example of someone who's actually trying to engage in some good faith conversation, to me, I thought was something more of us should be trying to do.
Kaitlyn, do you think it's time for us to have conversations offline? Is that even...
Amen. And the other thing I was thinking, because I had seen before you brought this up, both the clip that he was responding to of this woman giving this, I mean, she has a lot of clips of preaching in front of a large crowd of people. And she's done a couple of clips that seem to be about this topic of why do we have the idea of a black church? Yeah. And are you elevating your ethnic identity to some kind of idolatry? It's such a good example to me of the way that a lot of white evangelicals in particular are taught to do theology is in the abstract. Yeah. And that's almost like the higher way of doing it is just to kind of get rid of any, not just like cultural baggage or specificity, particularity as a person, but also just like for it to kind of be above actual human life. Yeah. And what she was saying makes sense if, as you said, none of the history is there. Yeah. And we miss that. I mean, this is my beef so often with people will ask me, for example, questions about how we read the Bible and politics. And what they're looking for is abstract hermeneutical rules that apply in every time and place, which is why I wrote a book that was like giving all of these rich historical examples, because you can't abstract out of those historical examples universal rules that apply in all times and places. Yeah. There are some universally good and bad ways to read the Bible. And to her point, there are probably some universally good and bad ways to think about the church. But that can't be said of every single thing that needs to be said.
Because it is both true and false. I mean, it's true, right? That there is no black church. There's only the Church of Christ. So in the sense of like, theologically speaking, there is only the one Church of Jesus Christ. Yes. But one of the things that is at least important to do is to, so if you're sitting in 1860 or 1840 or even early Reconstruction, and you have a group of churches that have been excluded by virtue of race from a white church, and these two churches are having a discussion about slavery. The white church is literally the white church white Christians are having one argument and black Christians are having the other. And so as a moniker, it is actually accurate.
Yeah.
And so sometimes to say the idea is if you remove the moniker, you will create the unity.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be like these kinds of short circuits. It's similar to when people say, oh, there is no biological difference between races, so we should not use the language of race. Well, the language of race, or like black, Asian, they were obviously tools of oppression that were created to categorize one group of people as less than. Just not saying the word anymore doesn't do that damage. We often have this like magic bullet to fix our racial divisions, and nothing that is this complicated and this persistent can be handled by a magic bullet. But I feel like I don't want to be like too mean to this young lady. And I do want to say this last part that Charlie said, I think that was interesting. Because he said that given what's going on in the culture, we're in a heated moment, that it's up to the church to take down the temperature.
Yeah.
And one of the things we've tried to do on this podcast is actually not get into angry reactions that condemn the thing that we don't like.
Yeah.
And the part that I want to highlight here is the invitation for conversation.
Yeah.
And the conversation where there are going to be no clips, it actually allows for people to have a real opportunity to learn. So I actually hope that she says yes to this. And I'm not asking to be invited, but if they invite me, I'll pull up too. You want to come, Kaitlyn?
Yeah, I would love to come.
There was a little bit of questioning of how we run our podcast. And it's actually related to Kaitlyn.
Yeah.
Because we took it upon ourselves.
Because I run your podcast.
Yeah, I know. That's how people jump into it. We took it upon ourselves a few weeks ago to do an emergency episode.
Yeah, and I was offended.
Well, about Taylor Swift, the new album.
I haven't even gotten out to it.
And Kaitlyn, you weren't the only people offended.
Yeah. So,
I know. I got messages online that were like, why did the Holy Post universe include anything about Taylor Swift that didn't include you? And then the Wheaton PhD women's group chat, which I'm an honorary member of, was upset about both the fact that I was not included and the fact that Esau listened to 3 songs on the album before recording it.
Wow. I was upset about that too.
They compared it to writing a book review of a book you haven't read. Which I think is accurate.
I haven't even gotten to introduce the topic.
Yeah, sorry.
A few weeks ago, we did a review of the Taylor Swift new album,
The Life of a Showgirl.
Yeah.
And we did not include you into the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. You said something about a resident Swiftie, and Lindsay.
Yes, Lindsay, yes.
Lovely.
Yeah,
I think she's lovely. I'm literally resident. I'm the literal resident.
Okay, Kaitlyn, I've got a question though.
Oh, okay.
Did you listen to our podcast episode?
I have listened to 75% of it thus far.
Okay.
I listened to it on my walk over this morning.
Okay.
Lindsay, I love. Okay. And I love what she had to say.
Great.
Mm-hmm. And Mike, impressed that you listened twice before the
recording.
Okay.
Those are the comments I have.
Okay. So let me explain at least how we do it.
Okay.
That is a running gag on our podcast that I review things that I haven't listened to.
Yeah.
I also did a review of Sinners, the movie, without having watched the movie.
Accurate.
I loved that
and so
movie.
we often, as a joke, just to kind of like, as a take.
Yeah, okay.
And so it was not meant to be a real review of Taylor Swift. It was just like, this is interesting. And so also I had someone who is going to sell me on it. So I didn't need to do the work.
Yeah, okay.
And so what
you should just talk to the PhD women students because they
I didn't realize I had ups. I want to issue a public apology to all women who were offended by my lack of taking a deep dive.
Can I just say though,
yeah.
I'm a little disappointed that it feels like the majority of our audience, of the Esau McCaulley audience, with producer Mike, they like Kaitlyn better than both of us.
Clearly.
I mean,
I'm not shocked.
I'm not sure there's ever been like people coming into the Kaitlyn podcast going, why wasn't Esau on this topic?
I'm pretty sure every episode now, no matter what we're talking about, it's going to be where's Kaitlyn?
Yeah,
so
fair.
We did want to give you a chance to say a little bit. And there was something that you mentioned about some of the reviews. And I actually have listened to more of the album since then. And maybe I'll have some takes. I think I'm now at like maybe 50 to 60% of the songs.
Oh
it's like a 40-minute album.
It takes no time.
So tell us, there was something about that you wanted to respond as to how some of the people, the reviews that are actually coming in.
Yes.
What did you want to say?
Well, first of all, I loved the album.
Okay.
I am a Swiftie, but also I will say I am a Swiftie that kind of leans on the fun pop, Taylor Swift is in love with someone side.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit, I've never honestly had a very dramatic breakup. I've never been super angry at a man. Well, wait. I've never been super angry at a man who I was once in love with. That's never happened to me.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that music she makes, but I was not one of the girls that got to like the Tortured Poets department and was like, this is my life. So I loved this album. I feel very strongly about a handful of the songs in particular. But the thing that I have really grated against, one is Mike sent me a comment responding to your emergency episode. Yes. Mike, do you know like what it said exactly?
So essentially it was that the person's 17-year-old daughter has commented that among her and her friends, they think it's a little tone deaf of Taylor Swift to have this album about how happy and in love she is in the midst of all of the horrible things happening right now.
Yeah, and I understand why someone would feel that way. I also have a lot of personal experience with like both with people reacting that way and with the weird dissonance of that. I loved this album from Taylor Swift in part because I'm in love right now. And I was like happy to be in love at the same time as Taylor Swift. Yeah. But also in the lead up to the 2024 election, I was doing a lot of really intense work because I talk about faith and politics. Yeah. So that whole fall in the lead up to the election, I was traveling like crazy. I was going into churches that were on the verge of splitting and going into Christian schools that are declining and everyone being so stressed about the election and families are falling apart. And I was falling in love while that was happening. Yeah. And so I understand the dissonance of going like, it feels wrong to be joyful about something that some people could say is not that falling in love is superficial, but some of the parts of it can feel sort of superficial. Yeah. And that in comparison to the weightiness of global politics and war and famine, and it makes total sense that that would feel wrong. And yet, I think both there is this weird cultural dynamic where we assume that we, you know, to be really serious politically, we have to be kind of in the suffering of the world constantly, when actually I think the joys that we are given can sustain the kind of life we need to live to be able to advocate for the suffering in the world. And I think there's this kind of Christian element that permeates, as like a lot of American culture has been permeated by Christian ideas. There is, particularly with women, and a lot of scholars have documented this, there is a dynamic with women where we sort of think to suffer is to be pious or to be righteous. Yeah. And to be joyful or silly is to be trivial, is to maybe be sort of spiritually dangerous. Yeah. Like women in love are sort of dangerous, and also women who are too into Taylor Swift, that's superficial and it's like glittery and girly and that's silly. And this is a conversation we've had about Taylor Swift forever, where it's like, actually a lot of her lyrics are really beautiful and rich and deep and speak to something relatable and authentic. But also, things that women love are not automatically silly. Yeah. And a woman being in love is not automatically silly. And actually, I think the part of the album that resonated a lot with me was, this is a woman who has, at the height of her career and at the height of her industry, you can't get bigger than Taylor Swift in terms of money, in terms of fame, in terms of both, I mean, critical success too. Like it gets pigeonholed as just a bunch of little girls who love her music, but a lot of very serious music critics are like, this is quality stuff. Yeah. She's at the height of her industry, height of her career, and she wrote an album that's not just I'm in love with a football star. She wrote an album that's like, I'm in love with a football star. Also, I thought that I wanted the grind and the fame and the showgirl thing. And actually, I'm wondering if really what I wanted was to like have a couple kids and get married and have that kind of life. And so then there's like, you can paint that in the worst possible way of just like, oh, that's a patriarchal vision of a good life. But I think underneath it is also a woman going, I thought all this success would really satisfy me and it hasn't. And I've been looking for something else. And I think that's actually really beautiful.
So I want to say a couple of things. Yeah. I struggle with this same idea around like how, first I want to make sure I acknowledge all of this stuff. So I want to build and not toss it to the side. I struggle with like the same thing on social media. Mm-hmm. So we have like, if you're in Chicago, every single day I'm permeating, like I'm seeing ice raids and I'm seeing all of these other things and I'm not just seeing them, I'm bothered by them. Yeah. And there are people in our lives who are being affected. Yes. If you live in Chicago, this is inevitably a part of your life. And just more other parts of the country too. And so I feel like, should I post about like my son going to the prom? And it's like, you know, does it feel, or are we allowed, like, is the public discussion of joy in the context of human suffering belittling the suffering, or is it our job to keep the suffering before the people the entire time? And what is it that feels performative? So if I don't post about the things that are happening in society, but I do post about the things that are happening in my life, am I ignoring? And so I think that struggle of, can we be happy when there isn't a lot of things to be happy about in the wider society?
Yeah.
And I do think maybe it's someone who was like, who grew up without a lot. One of the things that we would often do is like try to find joy in poverty and like laugh about poverty. Yeah. And so for me, it was literally the finding of the joy in the context of there not being enough to laugh about that I found emotionally helpful for me. And I do got to admit, like sometimes I read stuff and I kind of go, man, should I be taking this seriously? Or am I just doing enough? And so maybe you're right. Like maybe weirdly enough, me and Taylor have something in common.
Yes.
There we go.
I love that. Absolutely.
And then can I push back on some of the other stuff that we got in trouble for on the Taylor?
Yeah.
On the Taylor Swift
well, wait,
topic?
can I say one other thing about that? I love that. And also, there's this really beautiful poem that someone sent me. I'm not going to read the whole thing.
A Taylor Swift poem?
No. This is a poem. I'm going to figure out in a minute who wrote this poem. But someone sent me this poem after I spoke at a church event recently saying a similar thing of just like women in particular have been told, and Christians in general, there's this kind of like, to be pious, to be righteous is to be serious and to suffer. And actually to enjoy God's creation is also to enjoy joy. And there's a line from this poem that I really love that's along those lines. And one of the things it says is, to make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil.
Whoa, that's a bar.
Intense.
I love that.
There we go.
Because to be a Christian does mean to take really seriously the depth of evil and injustice in the world. But to make that the whole story is actually to say that the devil is right about what the world is and not God the creator.
It does feel like a version of virtue signaling to be like, I am so upset about what's happening in Chicago that I refuse to like the Taylor Swift album. It's like, I'm not sure that's helping anything. Like I can like the Taylor Swift album and I can go protest what's happening in Chicago.
So what
don't have to be opposed to each other.
What I try to do, and maybe this is more because I just use social media differently than I used to in the past for a variety of reasons. But when I think about my own spiritual life and how I communicate with my congregation, how I communicate with my kids, I try to balance clarity around the need of social transformation, of talking about what's happening in the world, while I want them to know that there is something inside of them that cannot be healed through protest. That you can go, and I've said this so many times in my church, they're probably sick of me saying it. You can go and protest, and actually it's not just ICE, because like there's been a cascade of protestable things over the last 8 to 12 months. You can go and do that protest, and come home and be a jerk to your friends and your family. You can have a broken marriage and protest stuff, and at a certain point, the most damage, oftentimes the damage that is done to the people who are closest to us are where we have the most influence and the most potential to do harm. And so it's really important for us to do the interior soul work. And so as clear as I am about structural injustice, I like to talk about the inner transformation of the person. Yeah. Now, Mike.
Wait, we got to talk about one other thing.
Oh, yeah, the thing we're going to get in trouble for.
Yeah, because we did get a lot of comments as well about people saying like, why are you promoting this album when she uses a lot of explicit language? There's a lot of innuendo.
I don't think it's innuendo. I think I think it's pretty explicit.
She sings a lot about sex.
There's a mix.
A lot of swearing. Yeah. And so it does, my question for you two, quickly here is, what is the role of a Christian when we see the world celebrating something that we feel is opposed to our values and our beliefs?
I would say something about like the philosophy of the podcast, and you can talk about Taylor in particular. Yeah. So we don't think that we promote anything on this podcast. It's saying you should engage in this for your own edification.
Yeah.
We think that culture reveals both the image of God, right, and the brokenness of humanity. And that what people are articulating through art is revelatory. So we can see through a person's struggle to find meaning, something that can be answered by God. And so Taylor Swift or Kendrick Lamar or Chance or any of these other people, or even the movies that we talk about, are conversation pieces that are about the other thing. And it's always about the other thing. And so when I say, hey, there's someone who is trying to figure out the balance between what she thought success was going to be and what actually brought her joy.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we as Christians think about the lies that we believe in culture? It's a conversation piece. And so for me, that conversation piece does not always mean that the artist in question came up with an answer that we agreed with. It just means they asked interesting questions. And sometimes they stumble upon answers that we would say are deeply resonant with the Christian faith. And so I just don't know if I can say the only people who are asking interesting questions are people whose conclusions I agree with. And if that's the case, then you can't have a culture podcast because culture is unredeemed. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I understand, and maybe we should have made this clear for the people who don't listen to the podcast. We are going to talk about culture as a given, and we're going to expect people to be able to make the nuances. Now, to be clear, I also hadn't listened to the album, and had I listened to the album and done my homework, I probably would have said, "Wow, you know, Taylor is out in the she's outside doing some stuff there.
She's very in love. She's very in love."
So, and that's just not. It's not just because she's a woman. Like I don't listen to dudes who that in love, and so I do say like. That was an interesting, I was not ready for that.
Yeah.
So anyways, you don't have to defend Taylor, but you can say whatever you want to in response.
Yeah, I mean, people should, pray, listen to their conscience. I'm not going to say that everyone should consume everything because I have things that I'll go, that is too far for me, whether it's sexually explicit content, whether it's violence, whatever. I have my limits too. At the same time, to your point, Esau, she is not beholden to the theological constraints that I am, and I shouldn't expect her to be. She's not in my church. I'm not in a position of spiritual authority over her to say one way or the other what she should do. But to your point, I have had so many great conversations with Christians and non-Christians about the themes in this album that to your point, I think Christianity has really beautiful, good answers to. One of those things not just being, hey, this work I was doing, this fame I had, the success I was pursuing did not satisfy me. And so maybe this relationship and having kids and getting married will. That's not. There's been a lot of talk online about is Taylor Swift a trad wife?
Oh,
or like basically I've seen a lot of Christians, interestingly, being really pro this album in spite of some of the content because the end result was she wants to get married and have kids, and that's supposedly a Christian thing, and so we should praise that. I think it's more complicated than that. I actually think this album is a really beautiful place for Christians to engage with a larger cultural conversation that is raging right now about, on one hand, especially among women, on one hand, there's this like girl boss mentality of I don't need a man. In fact, kids will probably stunt my career. I should just pursue the things that men have had the freedom to pursue, and I'm going to have the highest, best career ever. On the other end, there's this been backlash to this. The trad wife thing, I think, is meeting this real need some women have felt of actually, is it okay to desire marriage and children? And they've taken that, I think, really far.
So you don't want to churn butter?
I'm not interested in churning butter at all. But it does seem like these are the options available to us right now on the internet, at least, is like the girl boss or the trad wife. And one thing I think the Taylor Swift album does not say, I don't think she says this at all, but I think it opens up a conversation for Christians to enter into and say, actually, fame, success, money, and marriage and children will not ultimately meet the real desires that you have, which I believe are for Christ ultimately and belonging to Christ's kingdom and his family. And even in the album, a lot of the critics have said there's little hints that maybe finally getting the fairy tale romance she wanted doesn't seem to actually have fully met all of the desires. She doesn't seem as excited about it as you might imagine, or there's moments when you think it doesn't seem to have met her deepest desire. And I think there's an opportunity, not in necessarily the cringiest evangelistic way, but to just say in conversation, especially with women, maybe the options available to you, neither are fully good. Maybe a little bit of the stories both are telling are true in that your work is valuable and love and family are really valuable, but neither of those are going to fully satisfy your deepest desires.
There has to be a little bit, and then we're going to head over to Mike's Corner, a little bit of keep the same energy. And what I mean by that is, I get it. We can clutch our pearls about like some of the elements of the Taylor Swift album, which I think the pearls are clutchable. But I will say we are also in the cursification of politics, in the sense of like profanity is everywhere and vulgarity is everywhere. And it has become normalized on television amongst politicians.
Yes.
And so what began actually with, I would say President Trump started it, but everybody curses now.
Totally.
And the idea that it's like, I used to be able to think, oh, I'm listening to a news show, but now you just never know. And not just that, but the way in which like, you have to consume enough sports talk podcast to say people talk about going to like strip clubs, like the idea that this is a uniquely vulgar album in the midst of an otherwise pristine moment, where not just that, the language online discourse is, to me, public discourse is such a current cesspool that actually it didn't strike me as being out of the ordinary from the stuff that we hear. Now, speaking of like people being mad about what's going on in the culture, Mike, here's your corner. Here's your moment.
Here's my moment.
Well, does Kaitlyn give you a corner, by the way, when you on our show?
Kaitlyn gives me more than just a corner. We are equal participants.
Okay, Mike's
it's a conversation.
So last week we talked about Bad Bunny was announced as the halftime performer for this year's Super Bowl. And many people are upset because, one, they've called it a not very American choice, even though Bad Bunny is an American citizen.
Because he was
from
born
Puerto Rico.
Which is part of what?
Which is part of America.
Oh, okay.
People don't know that.
Yeah, people don't know that. But yes, he is an American citizen. But many, if not all of his songs are sung in Spanish.
Yes.
And so it has now caused a conservative advocacy group, Turning Points, which famously is the group that Charlie Kirk founded. They have decided that they will perform their own alternative counter-program halftime show called the All-American Halftime Show.
Oh, All-American.
The All-American Halftime Show that will promote faith, family, and freedom.
Yes.
And more details to be announced
So it's
later.
interesting that like the Super Bowl halftime show is literally All-American.
It's all
There's one person who's on
already
it.
done.
Who's American.
It's already, yes.
So now here's the thing. And once again, there's tons of stuff that exists musically that is not for me.
Totally.
And I'm happy for the people to be happy for it. It's not for me. I don't know what Bad Bunny's music is about because I don't listen to it. And I know I took Spanish when I was in high school, and I can kind of follow, I catch every fifth or sixth word when I listen to a song, but I don't know what he's singing about.
Totally.
Right.
So, but the thing that I thought was interesting about this was, because we talked about the idea of people getting mad. That part, at least to me, is not the new part of their story is. What is the particular line that led people to think we need a Christian alternative? Is it because the content of his music was so objectionable that Christians can't listen to it? Or is it because it was in a foreign language? Mm-hmm. And I think, and I can't really prove this, but that what seems to be motivating this is that it's insufficiently American because it is not in English, and that the Christian part of it is being globbed onto this idea. And that to me sounds weird, a quintessential definition of Christian nationalism. This mixing of, this doesn't feel American, so while we Americanize it, we're also going to Christianize it. And the mixing of, you should think of Spanish as foreign and bad, is to me like this same kind of idea of a particular type of American, which also bleeds into a particular type of Christian. So I don't know if am I being unfair, Kaitlyn?
Well, I don't think you said this, Mike, in your description, but I just went and clicked on the website you can go to for AmericanHalftimeShow.com. And the only thing on it right now is either donate. You can donate some money to Turning Point USA, or you can fill out this form to be the first to receive information and updates on Turning Point USA's All-American Halftime Show. So it's like your information, and then it says, what music genres would you like to see featured? And among the options, Americana, classic rock, country, whatever, the first option available besides those actual music genres is anything in English.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that just seems kind of, and then that's the only thing that's there. And then would you like to sign up for text updates from Turning Point USA? So I mean, I completely agree. So I'm part of the danger, or the kind of like, the part that feels so slippery and kind of slimy is that there's always going to be an ability for someone to say, oh, no. It's not about speaking English. It's not about ethnicity or race. It's about Christianity and what's Christian. Because they can make an argument for his music. I don't know. I literally haven't listened to any of it, but I find it hard to imagine that they can't construct an argument that there's something sexually explicit or violent or something. But that's what makes it so hard, is the debate often ends up just being a back and forth of, well, here's evidence that it's not really about Christianity. Here's evidence it is about Christianity. And it's part of the challenge is you're always trying to get at what is someone's underlying motivation, and they're probably not going to be. I mean, I'm not always cognizant or honest about my underlying motivation. So I don't think other people necessarily will be either. And you end up in a place where they can make the argument that it's about what's, clean or family friendly or whatever. even though it seems so obvious to everyone else that it's not.
And let me be very clear about this. There are plenty of times, once again, where I'm looking at a halftime show, I'm thinking about the artist in the halftime show, and I'm going, we're not going to watch this. Like, I don't expose my kids to every single thing that happens on a halftime show.
Totally.
And not just halftime show, I do a lot of content moderation for my children.
Sure.
And actually, the other thing that we talked about is that, like, we sometimes, as our church, and this is like over the years when I've been a pastor, we said, like, it's a common thing to say, come over to my house and watch the Super Bowl. And I would sometimes say, let's just turn off the halftime show because, like, I don't want to watch it. So I actually do think that it is more than fine for a Christian to say, hey, this content is morally objectionable. But we looked this up, and I think we said it was in Coldplay was it 2016, 2017?
Yeah.
And then there was another one. Justin Timberlake was 2019.
And then Adam
Levine is in Maroon 5.
Yes.
So we've had like these three artists who I think we could find in their lyrics something that is really objectionable.
Yep.
And Adam Levine famously pulled off all of his clothes at the halftime show. And I'm wondering, would you be able to galvanize an entire country around a white artist with somewhat explicit lyrics? I've heard people say this should have been like a country music album, a country music show. And let's say you had a country music artist whose lyrics are about drinking and sleeping around.
Right.
Would you have been able to galvanize an entire movement against it? And that's the issue, not the idea that Christians are offended by content. You can decide that's not it. But what galvanizes people is, I think, what we're trying to get at.
And then the other kind of silly thing about all of this is the NFL, by electing Bad Bunny as the halftime performer, is not trying to say this is what it means to be a model American.
Right.
They are saying this is what's going to make us the most amount of money. He is the most globally streamed artist on Spotify in the world. It is purely a financial decision for them. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL does not have a long history of pursuing racial justice in America.
Not at all.
It's like they're a paragon of virtue.
This isn't like a woke decision for the NFL. This is money. It's all about money. And then I just like, at a personal level, it's like, can we just be okay if something is not for me?
That's the part that's so wild about this to me. I remember as a kid, I grew up in a military family. There were definitely Super Bowl parties that we were a part of. And it was assumed, even when I was a kid, that the halftime show would probably be something that not just for us children, but for my parents, they would be uncomfortable with. I scrolled back even further, and it's like, when it was Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake, when it was U2, when it was Shania Twain, like, I remember the assumption being, in a not as antagonistic way, that is pop culture. And we were like a CCM only kind of household. So like, there was just an assumption in the churches I grew up in that there would be stuff out in culture, and you might dabble in it and you might not. But the assumption was, of course it will be sexually explicit. Of course it will be, bad language. Of course it will be not aligned with the values that we hold and the kind of restrictions that we might put on what we would say or do. That was just sort of assumed. I think some of the Christian nationalism conversation is not just desiring for the country to kind of uphold the values that I hold, but sort of this assumption that that's already sort of true and it should be true and we should either take it back or maintain it. And I think there's something really healthy and good about returning to a point where we just sort of went, of course, the reigning pop star of the moment is going to sing songs that are not aligned with Christianity, even if their language was all the same, like was all appropriate, even if there was nothing sexually explicit, they probably are just not singing about Jesus. They're probably singing, they might even be singing about, or desiring to have lots of fame or money. And we would say those aren't Christian values to hold. So it's strange to go back. It's strange to return to a point that I don't think actually ever existed, where we said the Super Bowl halftime show should represent me or be something that I think is consumable for my family, because it hasn't been that way for a very long time.
I think it'll be, I'm kind of interested now that I kind of want to see this halftime show. Because what if you do have like some Americana and some rock, and then you toss in some like Christian music with it? Would that not be equally odd? Like, you know what I mean? Like if you have like this kind of stuff and then you just pray at the beginning and the end. Anyways, I want to say, Kaitlyn, it has been a joy to have you on the Esau McCaulley podcast.
This has been so fun, Esau.
I would say that we're going to have you back, but we don't want to overly book you. You have your own podcast.
Sure.
You have
I'm really busy.
The flagship. You're busy being in love. So I won't make any life of the Kaitlyn bad puns. But like, I know that you're really busy. I know you got a lot going on. But if you ever do have some time, we'd love to have you come back. And Mike, as usual, we're always happy to have you on the podcast, too.
And Esau, I'm always happy to ride your coattails. Take 10% of all future profits.
We will see you all next week on the Esau McCaulley podcast. Thank you. Bye.
Hi, everyone. I hate doing this, but our producer Mike is making me tell you to like and subscribe so that you can see more Holy Post videos and other people can see them too.